Is it possible for homosexuals to become heterosexuals? Dr. Christopher West here, the Theology of the Body guy. Let's take a look. We're continuing our series from my book, Good News About Sex and Marriage. We're looking at the questions I ask and answer there. We are on page 150. If you want to follow along and you don't already have a copy, check out the link below. Is it possible? This is what we want to look at. Is it possible for homosexuals to change and to become heterosexual? Before I answer the question, I say here, I need to clarify the terms being used. We use the words homosexual and heterosexual to distinguish between those, obviously, who are sexually attracted to the same sex and those who are sexually attracted to the opposite sex. These terms, homosexual, heterosexual, they are useful, I would say, in some contexts, but I also think there's a danger here. We're buying into a vocabulary that shapes the way we see the world and think about the world in a particular way. Most people don't realize that the terms homosexual and heterosexual were invented in the late 1800s. In all reality, when we look at the term homosexual and heterosexual, we realize that one is redundant and the other is a contradiction. All that really exists is sexuality. And sexuality, if you look at the root of the word, to sex something means to recognize the distinction. Think of the term section. When you section something off, you're saying this is not that. Right? To sex is to recognize the distinction of male and female. What happens when we add these prefixes onto the word sexuality? Homo means the same. When you add homo to sexuality, it becomes a contradiction in terms. It means same, difference. It's a contradiction. Hetero means different, difference. It's redundant. The word sexuality is all that really exists. Homosexuality, heterosexuality, again, they're useful terms in some contexts, but in reality, those words don't point to something substantive. That which is substantive is that which God created in the beginning. Haven't you read, Jesus says, that in the beginning, God created them male and female and called the two to become one flesh. We live in a fallen world. All of us inherit this fallen human nature. And that means the world has problems not just because of those people over there, but the world has problems because of my brokenness right here. And the invitation of Christianity is to become who we really are according to God's original plan for us before fallen nature distorted and twisted God's original plan. That original plan is still in us, and Christ comes to fan that spark into a flame. So we have to keep that in mind as I answer this question. Any other attraction, any other desire, other than what God created in the beginning, is a distortion, a privation, a lack of the original good. Any other desire or attraction, I say here, is like cold in the absence of heat, or darkness in the absence of light. Cold cannot change into heat. Rather, the presence of heat vanquishes the cold. Similarly, darkness cannot change into light. Rather, light vanquishes the darkness. Similarly, homosexuals don't change into heterosexuals. Rather, men and women simply become further aligned with who God truly created them to be. That is, as the sun rises in the cold and the darkness, people can and do experience warmth and light. In other words, the truth of sexuality can and does vanquish distortions of sexuality. Few will ever be at high noon in this life with all the cold and all the darkness banished. It's probably more accurate to say we live at dawn, a mixture of light and dark, cold and warmth. But whatever our particular struggles, and this is the key, because we are all, each and every one of us, with original sin, each and every one of us became in one way or another sexually disoriented. The good news of the gospel is that Christ comes to set aright what sin has distorted in all of us. So regardless, whatever our particular struggles, everyone can, through an ongoing appropriation of Christ's redemption, we can experience more and more the truth of sexuality as God intended it to be in the beginning. And even if not in this life, in the next life, as I have said elsewhere, Christ will bring to completion the work of redemption he has begun in us. Here's the tragedy. If we dig our heels in and say, referring to a distortion of God's plan for sexuality, if we say, God made me this way, then we are really refusing to allow him to remake us according to the original, wonderful, glorious plan of God. But here we also have to admit that this path to restoration of the original plan is not for the faint of heart. The only way to this redemption is through the cross, the death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And that means it's not going to be easy. Suffering will be part of this journey. The suffering may mean dying to a lifetime of diseased ways of thinking and behaving. The suffering may mean letting go of the very thing, perhaps, in which a person has wrongly posited his or her identity, and repositing that identity in the eternal plan of God the Father, which is offered to us through the death and resurrection of his Son. This is what the Christian faith holds out to us, the possibility of authentic restoration. Again, doesn't mean if you just have enough faith or if you just say this prayer, tomorrow all of your sexual addictions and distortions and perversions will be erased. Now, I would never want to imply that a person who experiences same-sex attractions or any other distortion for that matter, and we all experience them one way or another, as I've been saying, I wouldn't want to imply that such a person could simply rid himself or herself of whatever the distortion may be by praying hard enough or having enough faith. But as numerous men and women can testify, myself included here, in my own brand of lustful distortions, I have experienced a real transformation. Not that I'm fully there, not that I'm fully redeemed, not that I'm fully restored, but there is a path we can go on to experience more and more God's original plan coming alive in our hearts and in our relationships. Our struggles may persist, but Christ has opened for us a world of wonders through his death and resurrection. And this means there is always hope for us to become more and more the women and men God has created us to be. There is always hope of restoring in our hearts the original plan of God for our humanity. If that hope is not real, Christianity has nothing whatsoever to offer the world. If that hope is real, then the whole world should want to know about it. Lord, open our eyes to these wonders that you have opened to us through your death and resurrection. Show us the path forward to become the men and women we're truly created to be. I have so much more to share with you, my brothers and sisters. The Theology of the Body Institute is dedicated to helping men and women become the men and women God created us to be. I encourage you to check the links below to our patron community for ongoing formation. Check the links below to our online and in-person courses. Until next time, may you know in your bones that there is always hope of becoming who you are destined to be.